Hi, my name's Sergeant Steve Peña. I'm a detective here at the Anaheim Police Department, and I'm here with retired Sergeant Rick Martinez. Rick is the department historian for the Anaheim Police Department, and Rick worked here beginning in 1972.
1972. I was here for 39 years, and this building, I spent my entire career here and got a lot of history in this building.
So we want to take you on a tour of our department. This year, 2020, we're celebrating our 150th anniversary. The police department was founded in 1870 when we elected our first town marshal, who was David Dye Davies. This building is named after Mark A. Stevenson, who had the building built in 1963 while he was chief of police. At the time, John Kennedy was president of the United States. Disneyland was pretty new, and the police department was growing. It was growing so much so that we couldn't fit in our building at City Hall, that we were actually holding briefings outside of the police station at City Hall over at a Marine recruitment station off Anaheim Boulevard.
Yeah, the police station used to be located in City Hall, which is downtown Anaheim. That building's been raised since then, but he had a small jail in the back of the City Hall, and it was in bad condition. It dated back to 1870. So he wanted a new jail. The grand jury kept complaining about the unsanitary conditions and the intolerable conditions because it was so small. So the chief one day was interviewed by a radio station, and he told him that his jail was the worst jail this side of Tijuana. And he got in serious trouble for that, and city council threatened to fire him, but he asked them, was he lying? And so they ultimately gave him a building, and that building was erected here at the same location.
So with that, we'll go inside. So now we're inside the Anaheim Police Department's front counter. This is our lobby. This is where the public can come to get copies of police reports, to get fingerprinted. Sometimes they have to meet with a detective for interviews. A lot of people come in to get traffic tickets signed off. So usually, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, this is a very crowded, very busy area of our police department. And with that, we'll go inside and check out inside the building. So this is our records counter. This is where, kind of like the public front counter, our detectives in the morning may need copies of police reports. Everything is done electronically now, but as little as 10 years ago, every morning detectives would be here getting copies of police reports from our records bureau, and that's why they have this counter here. Over here, we have a timeline of Mark Stevenson's career. And obviously the building's named after Mark. He was hired in 1927. He was actually the brother-in-law of one of our officers who got him the job. And Mark became chief in 1946, is that correct?
In 1946, he started in 1928. So he's the longest serving member of the department over a number of years, 47 years.
All right, so let's continue our tour. So this is the mail room. Any mail that we receive from outside from the public or wherever we receive mail from all comes here, and there's many people throughout the department that are tasked with sorting it out. Most of the mail is to each other, from one bureau to another bureau, or from records to a detective unit. But this is our mail room. We also have mail that goes out into the public and mail that goes to City Hall, the Anaheim PD mail room. And across the hall is our traffic bureau.
Now, this portion of the building is really for the records retention, the filing of all the police reports, the traffic citations. There's two sections. There's the administrative side, and then there's, we'll be going into shortly, is the enforcement side of it. Now, what's interesting, Steve, is this portion of the building obviously looks modern and up to date, but when the building first was built, this used to be the actual office of the chief of police.
So these are the traffic sergeants. They supervise our traffic officers. Now our officers, our motor officers, our accident investigators out in the field respond to several crashes throughout the day. This is where they'll come and write their police reports at the end of their shift or during their shift. Right around the corner here is our accident investigators. They do all the follow-up investigations for all of our traffic accidents, major accidents.
Yeah, typically, the officers that respond out to the accidents out in the field, they take the preliminary reports, and then for the very lengthy investigations, fatals, that type of accident, there's going to be a long process of investigation. So these are the folks that do the investigations back here.
Yeah, I can say traffic has been an important part of the Anaheim Police Department since cars came into town in the early 1900s. It was one of the main reasons they hired police officers back in around the turn of the century, was to manage the traffic in the city of Anaheim. So on the other side of us here is the patrol captain's office. Captain Reiss isn't in his office, but he generally leaves his door open so you could take a peek inside there. When you originally came into the building from the back parking lot, this would be where the desk sergeant, watch commander, and our dispatchers would be. And the door that most officers would come in at the beginning of their shift was over here. As you can see, it leads to an outdoor atrium now, but back when the building was built, that would lead into our back parking lot, and this is where the officers would come in. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, at one point we actually had a time clock here on this wall.
Yeah, they would come in the back door, and then they'd have to clock in, and there was a rack. Everybody had your own time card, so you'd come in, and you had to be very careful what time you came in and what time you left, otherwise you weren't going to be paid for those hours. So people would line up out there just for the right moment to take their card out, pop it right there in the time clock, and then get working in the building. And if I can point something out, see, while we're here, what's kind of interesting is this was the back lot. So the police building only went from here on the west side to Harbor Boulevard, just on the other side. You can turn around, so you can see it was a narrow building, but this was the back lot. And this whole addition was added during a project called Police 2000, when in the 1990s they needed to expand it because we ran out of space. And when you look, see how far the building extends, the thing wraps around quite a bit. It's triple the size of what it originally was. So this building has really expanded to meet the needs of the department. And it was meant to take the department into the year 2000. That was 20 years ago, so I'm sure that the people in here are still busting at the seams.
Every day before our shifts, the patrol officers will meet here. So we have 3 briefings in this room every day, one at 6 in the morning, one at 2:30 in the afternoon, and one at 6 p.m. Our shifts are 12 and a half hours, so very long shifts. And each shift begins here in the briefing room. And typically in briefing, there's a roll call. We check attendance to make sure everybody's here at work today. And we'll provide some sort of any updates that came from the chief or from the captain of about what's going on in the department or what's going on in the city. We get updates from investigators and detectives discussing crime trends and things, people that they're looking for, or any critical information they think we might need. Another critical aspect of briefing is our training. Pretty much every briefing you attend, there's about 10 or 15 minutes set aside for training. It could be legal updates, it could be arrest control techniques, it could be watching videos of incidents that everybody else watches, the public watches on YouTube or things like that, anything that we can learn from. We also in this room are fortunate to have kind of our dedicated area for historical memorabilia, so to speak, that we held on to over the years. And the way this works is it starts at the beginning, back in 1870 with Marshall Davies being elected, and all the way to our current uniforms. And in between, there's all types of memorabilia and artifacts that we've used throughout the 150 years. And Rick is the one that put this together for us. So I'll ask Rick, what's your favorite article in this display?
Well, it's hard to take 150 years of a rich history and try to put it in a cabinet. So You know, everything here is very interesting. For example, this is David Davies, Anaheim's very first chief of police, again, called it city marshal back then. And we located his grave. And for me, that was really important to find out where he's at. And by locating the grave and seeing the ancestors, we got a much clearer picture of who this individual was. But most important to me when I see that headstone is he really lived. It was a guy that 150 years ago formed this police department. There's some other interesting tidbits back in the early days before police radios. The way that they would send officers to calls was a person would call the desk sergeant in the police station. The desk sergeant would then flip a light on top of a hotel downtown Anaheim. At the Valencia, this light would come on, and if the officer that's patrolling on foot would see the light come on, and he would go to the police station to figure out where he has to go to. There's some other interesting artifacts in there. This is the magnifying glass for Chief Jim Bolden. What's interesting about Chief Bolden was that he used to be a professional baseball player. He was a first baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was a long-serving chief, but at the same time, he was serving as a police chief. He was also a baseball scout. So his second in command, Marcus Andrade, would take control of the city, the police department, during his short absences while he was looking for new ball players. But then we look back over here at the uniforms of these individuals. It's tough to find old uniforms, but this cap right here with the green color was worn back in the 1930s. And then these tan-colored uniforms, the khakis, were worn in the 1940s, 1947 until 1989. And then the department went to the blue uniforms. So we try to remind the employees here, the officers, of their rich history in the department and appreciate those that came before them, especially those that formed this very unique and historic police department. It's really actually interesting because we think of police women in the field as newer. When I came on in 1974, actually, we had the very first female patrol officer, but we were surprised to learn that females were active in the department as early as 1918. With Mrs. Alexander. Miss F.A. Alexander was hired as a female deputy city marshal, and in 1925, Mrs. Mabel Griffith became the very first female police sergeant. And that, you talk about the uniforms here, that's Vera Farmer Wilson. She was hired as a meter maid, so to speak, and she ultimately became a policewoman and the first female detective of this department.
We have a memorial wall for the officers here in Anaheim that have been killed in the line of duty. The first was Marshal Charles Lehman, who was killed in 1872 in a fight at the Anaheim Brewery. We have helicopter pilot Gary Nelson. He was killed in the 1970s in a helicopter crash. And in the 1980s, Robert Ralston was killed in a motorcycle accident. And there is one person missing from here that was killed in the line of duty, and I'll let Rick explain how that came about and why he's not on this wall yet.
Well, yeah, you know, you asked early about how many chiefs we've had. We've had 36 police chiefs or city marshals, but we weren't aware of one of the city marshals until just about a year and a half ago. And in doing some research, we learned that there was a guy named Rudy Bond. And Rudy, who started off as the night watchman, the guy that worked the graveyard shift, turns out he was elected as a city marshal. And when we did the research, we found out that he was actually killed in the line of duty. It took a lot of work to find that out, but we realized that he had arrested a couple of prisoners downtown Anaheim at a saloon, and as he got to the city jail, he was savagely beaten, and he died as a result of his injuries. So in 2020, he's been added to the national and state memorial walls for officers killed in the line of duty.
All right, let's go down to the watch commander's office. So this is the watch commander's office, the patrol watch commander, and you can imagine in patrol there's almost 140 police officers here in Anaheim assigned to our patrol bureau, and we're divided amongst 7 patrol teams. And this is the watch commander's office, and we actually have 4 watch commanders to cover 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So when you walk in here, you'll see that there's 4 desks. This is Lieutenant Roman, who's the watch commander today. And you can see that there's 4 other desks in this office for the watch commanders to use. And just across the hallway, we have the desk sergeant's office. Kind of interesting, this role, this position at the police department is kind of unique. Not too many police agencies have a desk sergeant. And maybe, Rick, can you talk about when we first got a desk sergeant and why?
Yeah, you're right. I'm not aware of any other police department in Orange County that has a desk sergeant position, and it dates actually back to the early 1920s. And that's the days where there was a very small police department. It probably only had about 10, 11 officers. And so somebody would man the police station the entire time, and that was the desk sergeant. And the desk sergeant was sitting at a desk, and if somebody called and needed the police, the desk sergeant would answer the phone, send the officers to the call. He was also responsible to answer any questions that the public had. So if somebody came to the police station and needed to file a report something, that desk sergeant would handle all the duties. And so unlike other police departments who transitioned away, the Anaheim Police Department retained that position of desk sergeant so that the desk person can stay in the building the entire time, and the watch commander, who traditionally would be handling those duties, here in Anaheim, the watch commander can go out in the field and monitor what the officers are doing out there. So Anaheim's retained that very historic position, and it continues to this day.
All right, the next room we have down the hallway here is our patrol report writing room. As you can imagine, when officers finish their shift, if they have any arrest reports to complete or any reports in general to complete, this is the room that they're able to come in and work. You can see here all these gadgets behind me. These are all the body-worn cameras used by the officers. So at the beginning of your shift, you will come to take your body-worn camera and you can put it right onto your belt or wherever you carry it. Our department lets officers carry it here on their chest or on their belt. And at the end of the shift, they simply put it right back here in this docking station, and all the videos are uploaded into a secure server and stored as evidence. In the back of the room, we have a juvenile holding tanks. So anytime a police officer arrests a juvenile, they're not taken into the jail with the other adults. They are brought into our report writing room, and we have this holding facility in here. And if you look inside, you can see there's nothing that we can handcuff them to, or we don't handcuff juveniles to fixed objects. They're just kept in this room, generally unhandcuffed, if they are brought into our facility. If they are handcuffed, usually they'll just sit out here in a chair with the officer who's doing the arrest report. Each individual officer is assigned their own computer. So we don't share computers, they belong to each individual officer. So most officers take them home. If they don't want to take them home, they can leave them here in the report writing room. But at the beginning of their shift, they would pick it up, and these actually dock into our police cars. And this is what we use to receive our information about the radio calls we're going to. We type our police reports on these computers, and we actually electronically submit them into to records to be a permanent record. All right, so throughout this tour, we've been talking about the basement and the bomb shelter, so we're going to take you that now. This is where I will take people on a tour to show them the difference so that they can identify the bomb shelter. If you knock on this wall, and compared to this wall, which is solid, pretty solid. So if you go right over here, you can see we've made good use of our bomb shelter these days. And we've turned it into our department's gym. So in this room, originally it was a bomb shelter. On the other side of this wall over here, there was an emergency operations center with tables and desks and different communication devices that they would have back in the early 1960s. Then ultimately this was our dispatch center, and now it is our gym. And it's probably the safest place to be in the building in case of an earthquake or a natural disaster, because it's a functioning bomb shelter. And I will show you this interesting trap door that maybe Sergeant Martinez can tell a little bit more about it. There is another trapdoor in the room next door on the other side of this wall. But tell us what these trapdoors are.
Well, when they built this portion of the police building, again, we have to look back in the 1960s and the fear of some sort of an attack, and there was always these practices and air raid symbol signs and alarms. So with the belief that there was that the United States could be bombed, they built this secure facility. And there's actually two portions of this large area. So this would be a portion of the bomb shelter for the police employees, but they had a hatch here should anything really get really bad, and you could pop this hatch, and there was another room back there. And that was where they would set up the ham radios and get some auxiliary forces, those from civil defense, and they can operate their operations from that side. But what's really interesting about this, and right now that is a secure facility right now because they use it for some storage, but on that wall, just on the other side, where that door is, on the other side of this mirror, is another small trap door that's located kind of high. Most people haven't even recognized that it exists, but it's a tunnel to get out of the building should there be some major attack and everything else collapsed around here. So if you remove that patch, that panel, you would see dirt, and there was a shovel in there so that you can dig yourself out of a predestined tunnel that would take you to the front of the police building. So this thing is quite historic when you think about the way it was built and why it was built, and when you look at just how thick the concrete is in this portion of the building. As a matter of fact, I think that's the only city bomb shelter in existence in Anaheim.
There is one more.
Oh.
I just learned there is a second bomb shelter in the city of Anaheim, and it's at the public library at 500 West Broadway.
Oh, interesting, because the buildings were built at the same time.
We showed the current patrol briefing room, but back in 1963, this was the patrol briefing room, and now it is the men's locker room. So it's gone through some significant changes. Now I know this room here, Rick, was this a training room?
Yeah, this was the training room. So now being the other portion of the gymnasium, this actually was a little bit wider because the hall actually, the walls were extended, but this was where the officers would receive training. As a matter of fact, in the 1970s, they held the police academy here. So it alternated between the Fullerton Police Department and Anaheim Police Department. So nowadays, the majority of Anaheim officers are trained at the Orange County Sheriff's Academy. But back in the 70s, they received their entire police training either in this building, or the next session would be at Fullerton, and then it would revert back here.
How you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
Sir, how are you?
Hi. So this is an area for people to clean their weapons. Yeah, so we are able to set up obstacles for officers to simulate things we might come across in the field. We can turn out the lights and make it pitch black in here, and so we have to use our flashlights. And I know throughout the years we've had range masters that have been very creative in the things that they've brought down here to simulate as best they can what we might face out in the field, including the bright lights that are on top of the police cars, car doors shooting out of a car door, or various other things that we might find ourselves into.
This building is quite old, but it's quite useful. It also is very helpful for Anaheim officers in that Anaheim police officers do not have to leave Anaheim to go practice shooting, unlike other cities where the officers would have to be scheduled to leave the city and go to a shooting range. Here, Anaheim officers have the convenience of taking time out of their workday, coming down here, shooting, and getting back into service and take care of the people that they're supposed to be out there taking care of.
Well, I think it's time to go check out the chief's office. Okay, we're on the second level of the police department, and at the end of the hallway is our chief's office, and along the way we've got plaques that highlight the careers of all of our previous police chiefs, starting with Marshal Davies and ending with Chief Cisneros, who is our current chief. In this building, this is Chief Joe Malloy. Chief Malloy came here in 1988 and was the first chief to actually occupy the office that we'll go inside and check out. And since then, Chief Gaston used that office, Chief Baker, Interim Chief Sane, Chief Welter, Chief Quesada, Chief Harvey, and now Chief Cisneros uses that office. Now, it would be a missed opportunity to talk about Chief Kennedy, who was the chief who designed this building, this expansion. We can attribute a lot of his ideas for the things that we have in this building, including our training auditorium, which he designed after the training rooms at the headquarters of the FBI back in Quantico, Virginia. Okay, so here we are in the chief's office. We have the chief's executive assistant. This is Cindy Hernandez.
This chief's office is actually one of the larger offices for any city department head, and this office space was created when they enhanced the police building back in 1991. So the chief is fortunate to have a large office where not only does he have workspace, but he also has a conference table in here. He has his own personal restroom, and it's away from all of the other noise in the building, so to speak. So a lot of important decisions are made inside this room.
Yeah, so our current chief, Chief George Cisneros, he has worked at a couple different agencies. He's worked at Huntington Park Police Department, the Long Beach Police Department, and now he's here at Anaheim. And he's got some of his personal memorabilia up on the walls, along with some more historical photos. You can see there's Mark Stevenson's original door plaque. Some early pictures back in the early 1960s. And there are some interesting historical pieces of memorabilia. As we've been talking about this building, this is actually an invitation to the grand opening, the dedication of this building back in 1963. Pretty cool. I know we have some artifacts here as well, Rick. I know we have a payroll book from the 1920s?
Yeah, this is a payroll book from 1925, July of 1925. This is, if you look, these are the actual entries in here. And when you think about the size of the Anaheim Police Department today, this is how many people were in the department. You have Chief John Martin, and this is how they kept track of who was coming to work. And we found this in a box that was long forgotten, so we thought it was appropriate that it go here in the chief's office.
All right, from here we'll go up to our dispatch center and our communication center. This is where all 911 phone calls are answered, and the dispatchers are dispatching calls to the patrol officers out in the field. So this was a part of the expansion of the police department. Dispatch has been in different places in our building. We showed you the first one where Captain Reiss sits. Then later on it was down in the basement where the bomb shelter is, to be exact. And then ultimately it ended up here in the expansion on top of our record or property evidence bureau. So it's a secured facility. Dispatchers don't let, nobody can just walk in even though we're within the police department. Even still, they restrict access into the communication center just for extra security. The communications, the ability to communicate with 911 and be able to communicate with our officers is very important. We have to keep that very safe. So it's even further restricted. All right, so what you're seeing is our communications bureau. In the front, there's 4 workstations up at the front next to the window. Those are the dispatchers that are actually talking to the officers in the field on the radio. Generally, there's one dispatcher talking on our primary channel, and then they have a secondary dispatcher. A lot of officers in the field will ask questions of dispatch for more information, and it's the job of the secondary dispatcher to look up that information or to make phone calls on behalf of the officers, to maybe even call for a tow truck, to call a reporting person back to get more details. That's where that person will sit. The other tables are reserved for people actually answering 911 phone calls. The calls come in on a regular basis. Their job is to answer it. The 911 system works in a way, if it's from a landline, that the address and phone number is automatically visible to the dispatcher and they can send that information out pretty quickly. Cellular phones have gotten somewhat better, but it still doesn't give an exact location. So if you do call 911 on a phone call, on a cell phone, it's important to give your address to the dispatchers. Okay, so here we are with one of our 911 operators who maybe can tell us a little bit about the screens that she's looking at. Sure. She's got 4 different screens with all kinds of different information, so maybe she can explain what she's looking at.
Sure. Our first screen is over here. It has the calls that are coming in. You can see the non-emergency lines on this area here. Our emergency 911 lines will come in up here, and it has different areas where we can dial out. Over here is our status screen. You can see the different addresses and kind of calls that we're holding, and then the different priority levels by color. So priority 2 is orange. If you had a red up there, that would be priority 1. Priority 3 is yellow, and then the report calls are either blue or purple. Down here is where all of our officers are. The green is the officers that are available. However, a lot of them are detectives that are on details. The red ones mean that they're actually on a call right now. Yellow means they're en route somewhere. And then over here is where we enter in information into the calls. And we've got our map system over here where you can see all of the units.
All right, so this is our property detail. This is where officers at the beginning of their shift come and check out their police cars or any supplies that they might need. As you can see, they've got every type of pen, batteries that you might need. If you look back this way, they've got supplies, not only for patrol, but for all the entire department, office supplies and emergency medical kits, emergency medical supplies, anything that an officer might need during a shift. This is where they would come and check that equipment out. Inside of our jail, it is no weapons are allowed, and that even means the police officers. So before we go inside this jail, I have to lock up my weapon inside of this locker. So you'll see that once we go inside this door, we'll be in a real small little room, and once this door closes, then they'll let us go in the other room. So there's no door open to our jail at any time out to get out into the public. So we'll go on in here, and we call this the man trap. So once that door closes, this door will open, hopefully, or you're trapped. So officers will bring in an arrestee in our Sally Port area. This outside here is like a bay area that officers can drive the police car in. They can unload the prisoner, and they can bring him into the jail here. Another significant thing about our historical celebration here this year is that the Anaheim City Jail is also 150 years old, which is one of the oldest jails in Orange County. So once our prisoners are brought in, they're usually here greeted by one of our detention officers who will take down their basic information, verify their birthday, their address, and they'll do a medical screening to make sure that they're not in need of any medical attention before they are housed inside of our facility. And once that's completed, they're searched. Their pockets are searched, and for any weapons or drugs, and you'd be surprised with people trying to sneak in the jail, but they do. And so they're searched here, and then once they're done being searched, they are brought into a holding cell. This is generally speaking where they're able to make phone calls, and sometimes we bring people in who are far too intoxicated, and for their own safety, we have what we call it a drunk tank. But this would be the drunk tank, where we bring in people who are intoxicated so that they have the opportunity to sober up before they go into a holding cell and then into a actual jail cell. Our jail is actually quite large. And here's what a typical room will look like for our people that are in custody. Now, Anaheim's just a temporary detention facility, so nobody stays here longer than a day or two. But while they're here, this would be typically where they're housed. We have a large enough jail that most people have their own room. So when you have guests, so to speak, in your house, you gotta feed them. And the Anaheim jail does have its own kitchen.
I think, Steve, what's surprising as we walk down here is how large this jail is, actually. It's a large facility. This jail has been in this building since 1963, but prior to this, the cells were over behind City Hall, and there was just two very cold cells.
So this is the kitchen that if we're housing any prisoners, that our detention facility staff, or sometimes we have trustees that will prepare food for anybody that is staying with us during that time. It's a professional, very clean, professional kitchen. Now I have to, I was mentioning, Rick, that the Anaheim's jail is also 150 years old.
Yeah.
And was it the first in Orange County? Do you know?
Yeah, it was actually, Anaheim's jail is so old, Orange County hadn't even been developed yet. It was when Anaheim was formed and when they got their very first city jail, Anaheim was actually on land located in Los Angeles County. It was not until 1889 when the County of Orange was formed that Orange County and this land, separated from Los Angeles. So Anaheim's jail is 150 years old this year, 2020, and it's the oldest jail in Orange County history because it was long before Orange County was ever established.
Now currently, due to the pandemic, we're not housing any inmates in our jail. When officers bring in an arrestee into the jail, they're immediately taken to the Orange County jail due to the pandemic. And it's normally, if we take people on a tour of the police department, this is a no access area. So it's actually not too many members of the public have actually been inside of our jail unless they came with handcuffs. So it's actually kind of a treat that you're able to check out inside our jail. So as we start to wrap up our tour, we started on the outside in the front of the building. We figured we'd end on the outside in the back of the building, and this is our back parking lot where we park all of our police vehicles. We have the field sergeant vehicles up towards the front, the watch commander's car, and then all the patrol cars. And the other cars are either unmarked cars that our detectives use, or they could be personally owned vehicles of some of our officers. We also have city vehicles that belong to our public works department that often park back here. So in the back lot, we have our motor pad where all the motorcycle officers park. You can't see it because of all the cars that are parked over here, but people always ask, where do police officers get gas? Well, we actually have a gas station, minus the attendant and the snack shop, but we get our gas. It's a city gas station that we use to get gas inside of our police vehicles. Some other interesting vehicles back here. We've got an armored vehicle. The armored vehicle is used in situations where we want to get officers close to a situation where they can make a situation more safe, but they need that protection of that armor. So that vehicle is kept here in our back parking lot. And most of our patrol officers know how to drive it. It doesn't go very fast. It's fairly old, but they can get it out to a scene if necessary. All right, so that about wraps up our tour. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch our virtual tour of the Anaheim Police Department. I've been giving tours of the building for close to 30 years. It's the first time I've done one virtually. So thank you for taking the time to join us, and hopefully you can come out in the near future and participate in an actual tour of the department. And we hope to see you soon.